G'day, doggies fans, all things Bulldogs. So we've got a new segment that we're going to do over the next few weeks. It is called the Coach's Eye. I'm not the Coach's Eye, but the Rugby League Coach is. So welcome, Lee. Lee's going to run his eye over the next 3 Bulldogs games, at least, hopefully 5 games would be good, or 4 games minimum. And and provide his expertise and what he's seeing with the Bulldogs games in some of just pretty much giving his balanced feedback. And we might ask each other some questions and that sort of stuff as well. But, so Lee, what's happening at the end of the year? You going to England or?
Yeah, it's about 6 weeks away, so I'm running a Rugby League Ashes tour. I'm very close to announcing a Kangaroo legend that will be coming on board with us as the tour ambassador. I can also confirm he didn't play for the Bulldogs. I am sorry. The tour is creeping up on us, and I'm just preparing some materials for moving forward. And the more you dig into it, the more you realize how big the history is. So, for example, many people listening to this podcast will be aware of the Sydney City Tattersalls Club, for example. They donated the trophy in 1928, and then it was brought to England because Britain were pretty good at winning games of rugby league then against Australia. And in 1933, it went missing for 12 years. And it was actually in a box somewhere, and it was just completely overlooked for 12 years. And England and Australia are going to be playing for that trophy in the next few weeks still, because it got some repair works and restoration works in 2008, so it's in good nick, and that's what they'll be playing for still. So that just gives you one idea of the history of the Rugby League Ashes.
Well, I can't wait because we'll all be in rugby league morning, and this keeps us going through the off season. And
I'm trying to get you on the tour. I know you like flying, so.
Oh, yeah, as much as anyone else, especially cold, windy turbulence in Melbourne today. It was a bit scary, but in about 15 degrees, it's still like a Siberian winter here in Melbourne.
Will be. Well, it's probably English weather, quite frankly, and the weather we'll experience when we're there. I'm just glad my hair has grown back since you did the backdrop there. So you got the eyebrows more or less right, I think, and the glasses. But
I used what was it, Gemini or one of those programs to try and give me an image, and that was its perception of you, Lee. So
maybe if I was a Bulldogs fan, because I'm not a fan of any team at all, and if I was a Bulldogs fan over the last decade, my hair might be like that. But
well, I'm surprised I haven't lost my hair as well. So I know what you mean. All right, well, I reckon we can get into it, matey. But look, I was having a good read of your book today as well on the flight. So the Rugby League Coach, definitely a good perspective, and it's great to read, players that you've coached like Tedesco and Mulatalo and a whole bunch
of not so long
others.
ago when most of the players I'd coached were playing for the Bulldogs. So your Adam Elliott, your Watinas, Lesniaks, Darren Britt, who else?
Dean Britt.
William Hopoate was there, and also Kiko Manu, who just made a couple of appearances but was a very late bloomer and got his chance late. So I'm sure I've missed some out there too that play for the Bulldogs. So I've got quite a history with the Bulldogs in that regard.
Yeah, he went all right, Kiko. I think he moved to the Dragons after that, but then hasn't sort of, he might be playing park footy somewhere, which, tell you what, I've been watching a lot of Ron Massey Cup and that this year, and that's St Mary's team, I reckon, would beat a few probably compete well in that New South Wales Cup. A lot of good Jared Haynes back playing there as well for Wenty.
Okay, yeah. There's a team up in southern Queensland, Stanley River, who I think have got the envy of the A grade in Australia in their side. Robert Jennings is playing for them, for example. So he only played NRL about 2 years ago, I think, or a year ago. So,
well, Michael Jennings is playing for St Mary's, and so there's so, and I think they just won the grand final qualifier, like
yeah, same
68,
with Stanley
68,
River. Same with Stanley River up here. So yeah, should maybe
68, 68,
we
16
should
or
maybe
something.
organise a fixture to raise money for our podcasts between the two.
Oh, it'd go all right. St Mary's has pretty much provided half of the Penrith stars over the years, all through there. So they've obviously got a huge history, and half the other team stars as well. It's been all Penrith, as you would know, being their assistant coach in 2011. Was it?
Yep.
Yeah.
2011, 2012.
Mm.
Yeah, I was around that. Yeah. 2010, 2011. I think. Yeah, I get my years mixed up. And then Gus Gould came in and sacked all of us. So,
Yeah, he's little bit. A lot of CEOs do that. They come in and just think you're tarnished by everything else, and they just wipe you all out. They're not always right.
Never met the guy, but I must put on record again, and I've done this a few times. I have no animus towards him because, I've had a fantastic career since then. So it is what it is.
That's it, mate. We all learn. It's all supposed to happen for a reason, and it makes us stronger.
That's right.
So let's get into it. So we're going to look at the Bulldogs Panthers game, and I thought it was a good game to start with, particularly because obviously mindset and psychology come into it. There was really nothing to gain for the Bulldogs out of this. Like even a massive win would probably be dismissed. They just had to win, but still they would have wanted to have achieved some things in the match. And the coach will know. I hope to get a bit of an insight on what you might have thought they were trying to attempt in certain plays and whether it was working for them or not, and that sort of thing. But I also think that, you can only play who's in front of you, and that's what you got to do. So let's start. What was your takings from the game?
Well, first of all, I agree with you. I don't think the Bulldogs had much to gain apart from 2 points. And if they won heavily, which they pretty much did in the end, if they won really heavily and they were ruthless, everyone would have said, well, Penrith put their reserve side out.
Yeah.
Most people, though, did predict that Penrith would do a lot better than they did. And that's a different story again. So it was a game they had to get through. My perception of it, and to give you an overarching thought of what I think, I do feel some standards have dropped a little bit across the Bulldogs team. So I firmly believe that Cameron Ciraldo is a fantastic coach in general. Is a very good coach and a fantastic coach of core skill. He puts core skill at the height of things, and for a lot of Canterbury's last couple of seasons under Ciraldo, their core skills have been up there. It didn't take long for the first dummy half pass to go Ori, if you remember. That's bread and butter. And then there was a few decision-making things at the other end of the field that I'd like to talk about. So that was the first thing I noticed. Secondly, I felt very early in the game that there was some fatigue in the legs. And fatigue isn't always a physiological thing. It can be a mental thing. It can be a result of what they've done in training that week. So just because I sound like I might be criticizing them, I want everybody when they're listening to me to think, well, he's going to provide a reason for it. So you can look at your side, whether you're a Bulldogs fan or a Penrith fan or a Melbourne fan, and maybe have a look and think, well, They're heavy-legged. Most people will go, they're not fit enough. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that Cameron Srimaldo might have loaded them up that week in training. Might have done a heavier week. Might have done a heavier week the week before. I can't remember the backup. You'll have to remind me. Who did they play before they played Penrith and when?
The Melbourne Storm. Most teams lose after playing the Storm.
Yeah,
As do most teams lose after playing Penrith. As do most teams lose after playing the Bulldogs.
Yeah, so there you go.
This year.
So a game against the Storm where they went toe to toe. That explains to an extent, even if that on its own explains to an extent why they looked a little bit heavy-legged. The other thing is don't take out the fact that coaches at this time of year might be doing a heavier week in a week like that, leading up to the finals, so that they can peel right back for the finals, so that the players are full of energy, basically. So you look at your periodization over a 4 week, 5 week, 6 week period kind of thing. So that was there were the two main things I came away with, and the third was the defensive system actually got a bit more exposed than the coach probably wanted it to. Possibly a combination of the thing I've just spoken about, the heavy legs. So yeah, I
found there was a set early where Dane Laurie almost scored, and I saw it, and I've actually noticed this in a few games. It actually happened in the West Tigers, where our left edge defense, which typically doesn't, your left edge is more so where you concede less tries for most teams, because most teams are attacking your right edge just naturally. So, and I just felt teams are getting us on the blind side and getting us coming back in there and then leaving us short. Or even when they're not leaving us short, they're getting confused and a bit passive. I saw that in West a few times. I've seen it in recent weeks. I think the Roosters exploited us a few times. Some people would call it lazy. I don't know if it's laziness or overthinking or overplaying, or they just haven't been as aggressive. And they've also struggled a little bit slowing some teams down in that area. I feel the Panthers, we had them under control for 99% of that match, but that's some of those early sets. I felt, there was a little bit, they exploited us, and I think it was deliberate how they went about it too. Like they knew what they were attacking, and they actually almost scored from it. I don't know if you saw something in those opening minutes.
I saw plenty. When you're a footballer and you know you are playing a side that in theory shouldn't be as strong, you tend to find your level as the game goes on. It's very common. So people forget that we talk about the X's and O's, and we talk about defensive systems, offensive systems, patterns, etc., etc. The reality is you have to be tough to play rugby league, and it's a physical game, and you have to get yourself there mentally to compete 100% physically. And therefore, an easy game can come in two formats. It can be easier in terms of the opposition have less to throw at you, or it can be in the other format, which is they don't hit you as hard. Okay? So a footballer will, if the game in their head is seen as a little bit easier, they will sometimes try and pace themselves accordingly so that they don't bust themselves during that game. So you talked about the impact of the Melbourne game. If you imagine what they would have done in the Melbourne game, they would have gone, oh, we're playing Melbourne and Melbourne. Time to put the dial up to 100%. Okay?
Yeah.
Playing Penrith reserves and playing them at home, you could probably get away with your dial not being up to 100%. And maybe some of the Bulldogs players brought it down to 60 and Penrith were playing at their 100. So that's probably what you saw there. And I think that also ties in with what I was saying about the perceived heavy legs, which is only a perception at the end of the day, but saw what I saw. And there were some technical things that we can unpack there too that created. And they've been creeping into the Dogs game for a while.
Yeah. So, are you still there?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Sometimes it freezes. I'm in Melbourne,
Yeah,
and the
right,
internet with
yeah.
Optus isn't
Yeah.
as good here. So, yeah. So, what were the specifics you saw, in different parts of the game? Where were you? What were the major things that you wanted to highlight?
Well, because we're going to do quite a few podcasts, hopefully, I didn't want to talk about the whole game. I wanted to focus on a particular period mostly. Okay.
All right. Well, let's focus
And
on that.
basically, you can tell what a team is going to do, and you can tell what mindset the team is in from the first half of the first half. Okay. So I
Okay.
watched the game
Yeah.
through, and then I went back to the first half of the first half. And I saw a team that, I mean, do you remember they did a couple of really intricate plays at the top of the screen as you look from the camera? So on the left of the field, their left side attacking, they did some really intricate plays. They looked a little bit like the Ipswich Jets from 2015. Some players were running sideways. The ball was moving in all sorts of different directions. And I thought they were overcooking that. So I always think I have a doctrine, if you like. I always think a prop should carry the ball forward and as hard as they can because the defense probably doesn't want that prop to run at them. All right.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I tend to do. Do what you're good at and do it repeatedly. That's what I try and do as a coach. And I think that if you put yourself in the position of being essentially a New South Wales player, getting your chance at first grade, you probably were worried about certain people in the Bulldogs team. I mean, the Bulldogs have been one of our benchmark teams this year. So they obviously played a little bit different. Now, I think maybe Cameron Seraldo was trying some things because of the
Yeah.
opposition. But I just don't see the point of it, quite frankly. Maybe it's something that's in the bag for the finals. Maybe it gets put away this week, and then it might come out in the finals if they need something. But it actually achieved very little. You know, I think they tried it twice in that first 20 minutes where all the Penrith defence had to do really was just hold a line while they passed and ran sideways in different directions. And I think they would have been better served from the game perspective, not from the big picture perspective of trying to win a premiership, but they would have been better served just to cart the ball forward, go forward. And then the Penrith defence would have been really troubled with that. So that's one thing I noticed there. Secondly, I've mentioned the core skills. So obviously, they just seem to be a little bit off in attack. But where I noticed in the attacking element of the football, and quite often they would set their attack up to exploit a certain area of the field. So it might be the right side of the field that they want to exploit. And they were probably too easy to read. They probably went too often on the third tackle sideways rather than getting to a point and then shifting the ball straight away. So one of the ways I like to coach football, Mr. J, is I want the defense to be guessing on every single play. Okay.
Yep.
So I look for a passive tackle on every single play. And that includes my props. That includes my back three when they're taking the ball out. Their aim is to get a passive tackle. And I literally want to strike when the iron is hot, when it gets hot. Not try and say the iron will get hot in 3 plays, so let's try and strike then. And I think it just became a little bit readable at times. And then when they did try and shift, sometimes they got caught. So there was an incident quite early where Lockie Galvin got caught in possession. I think the ball was knocked down from memory.
Yep.
But it was really flat, and they were passing from too far beyond the scrum lines. They were passing from too close to the touch line, and that's basically very readable for a defence. Another thing, there was a couple of occasions, and you could argue that it was all part of a plan, but they had something like a 4-on-3 or a 4-on-2. and went to the short man rather than going long out the back to go around, and they would have walked in and scored tries. Now, they did that on the right and the left. When they did that on the left, though, of their attack, there was a defender called Brad Schneider in the number 7 jersey for Penrith. And I have been saying this for months and months and months on my various platforms and in writing that guy is a very, very, very poor defender. And the Bulldogs' left edge second row had a field day in and around there. And that they benefited then from going short. Now, some coaches and some halves will say, well, that's what we were playing for. We were playing for that break, okay? And that break can happen because you've worked those defenders over. I'm just arguing that they were in the finals, they're going to have to put the ball against green grass and fresh air a little bit more to exploit space, to get passive tackles, to get a quick play the ball on the back of that kind of thing, because the opposition are going to be twice as invested. Their dial will be turned up to 110 for the finals, as will the Bulldogs. So they were the attacking things that I saw there. And I don't know if you want to ask me any questions in and around any of those things that I've mentioned.
I'll make a couple of statements, which mainly aligns and also agree when you're talking about looking for the passive player in defence, because I don't know, I'm not sure you watched the Melbourne Bulldogs game, but the damage for the Bulldogs in that game was done quite early. Harry Grant had one significant role early in the game where he ran from dummy half and got that role and happening. But what Melbourne did early in their match, especially coming out of their middle third, was to do exactly what you were saying. They were looking for, they played wider, they played their props wider and found the weak points in the Bulldogs defence. And look, so Lachlan Galvin, obviously, not fully grown yet, not fully physically developed, by a long shot. And he reads defence quite well, but his contact is where he struggles a little bit. And teams have worked that out and they want to exploit it. So Otikamanu running straight at him and catching him isolated. And then what the back three of Melbourne were doing, which did a phenomenal job, the likes of Nick Meaney and Anderson and those. Coates was actually a little bit quiet in that match, but they actually were able to. They made a V line, and this is all set how they did it to go at Bailey Hayward and get him isolated in the middle. Bailey's a good defender, but what they've done with him is having him using his line speed and using those small guys to take time away from defenders and where the troops come in. Whereas it's different when he's isolated and sort of caught on the hop, and they're able to generate speed that way and make it difficult for the Bulldog system. And actually that's how they then got their repeat sets and got their field position. So they don't have the same kicking game as the Bulldogs. We know that, but they use that strategy really well. I also agree that, so going down the left and the right hand side of the Bulldogs back in this Penrith game, the Critter, they could have went out the back to Galvin, went to Critter, and Critter held the ball and got tackled in possession a few times. There was once where he offloaded it back, which is that one where the ball got knocked down, but the damage was already done. I also found, though, that do you think a 3.9 second play the ball speed, which is what our average play the ball speed was, obviously that might come down to two things. Are we putting enough effort in? Give the Panthers some credit that we're able to manage it, or whatever the case. Do you think a 3.9 second play the ball speed, which is about what you get in an Origin match, do you think that does impact the way a team can attack? If they have to play a different style, I believe, than what the Bulldogs played with that slow play the ball, because I just found they were able to spoil us and pick us off quite easily in that match, which is sort of going along with what you were saying.
I mean, the difference between a 3.9 and a 3.3 is is hardly worth the paper it's written on, really, in terms of momentum. I go back a point that I made. I just think that they went too many settling plays. So I'll try and explain something for you, okay? So I want everybody
Okay.
to imagine, listening and watching, that we're stood in the very centre spot of the field, okay? And you've got the ball in your hand, you get a penalty, or the half, okay?
Hmm.
You get a penalty, you're not going to kick for the sidelines because it's really windy, okay? If the defence is in front of you, so in this case, it's the Penrith defence, they will have two markers in play when there's a play the ball. But ultimately, right now, they've got 12 people in their defensive line, and they'll have a
Yep.
fullback. As soon as we get a play the ball, there'll be two markers. So there'll be 10 in the line rather than 12. So right at that point, you'd expect Penrith to have 6 on one side of you and 6 on the other half. Yeah?
Hmm.
So if we want to exploit something on the right side, so the left side of Penrith's defence, the half really needs to send 1 or 2 plays to the left to get towards the scrum line that's 20 metres in.
Yep.
Now, sometimes you can get there in one play, but depending on the quality of the play, the ball, which is what we're talking about there, would determine whether you maybe go one more to get some goal forward. So hopefully you can get that picture. We go 1 or 2 plays to the scrum line on the left, and we've got long space on the right. Okay, so we can expose. Now, if we strike and go sideways when they don't expect us to, i.e., on the first tackle or the second tackle, we'll be getting defenders that are going to tackle passively. Okay, because
Mm.
they'll be centered around the ball. Or their minds will be centered on the ball. They won't expect to have to shift, if you like. What I think the Bulldogs were doing too often, and I'm really simplifying it here for the sake of the listeners.
Yeah.
They were going 1 or 2 to the left, the Dogs, and then bringing another one to the right. So the Penrith defense was shifting back across again. Remember, there's only 10 in the defensive line now because there's 2 markers. And then they were trying to expose the left side of Penrith's defense, the Bulldogs right. I think that's what they were doing, because I think the NRL wants fast to play the balls, okay? So I think they're easier to get than they were even 3 years ago, okay? So most of the play the balls are pretty good. I think it's more the way they were structuring it. And then this goes to a deeper question, okay, that has another couple of layers. And I was hoping not to mention his name, but the halfback, Lachlan Galvin. Now, you don't have to be Einstein to work out that there's many people out there who are worried about Lockie Galvin as a halfback as opposed to a 5'8". Now, that brings a couple of thoughts to me. Number one, depending on your system, it doesn't matter who wears a 7 or 6 sometimes.
Yeah.
But if you follow a system where you want your number 7 to organise and to steer the team around, that process I've just talked about how you structure the plays before you do the play, is really important. Okay, different coaches look at it in a different way. Ricky Stewart, for example, whose team have just won the minor premiership, he likes to have 3 plays and then throw something at the defense, or 2 or 3 plays, I should say, then throw something at the defense that disrupts their line, and then give his players freedom on the back of that play.
Yep.
Okay, so that's a different way of looking at it. And who are we to question somebody like Ricky Stewart, who was a sensational halfback? But that was what I took from that, rather than the play the ball speed, which is what you asked me about earlier. And I think it's, and so therefore, if Lockie Galvin is struggling a little bit as a halfback, I personally believe he's more of a free-spirited player and he's learning how to play halfback. And that's fine. That could definitely explain that.
Yeah. I don't deny that at all. I think there's this train of thought when we talk about the Sexton and Galvin thing. I'm I know you didn't want to bring it up for those reasons. I don't necessarily look. Look, I've done a lot of work in this area and broken down all those games with Sexton and Galvin, and I think that Sexton could played his role, and I think the role playing in the team is very, very important. It's also something that they don't necessarily have to have the same players in the role. They all know what the roles are for what they're doing. They seem a lot more intelligent as players than what they seemed a few years ago, if that makes sense.
Yeah, they're being coached. They're being coached. They're being
They are.
educated by an educating coach.
And what I've heard is that it's like, Brian Smith used to get a lot of criticism for how in depth he was, whereas Wayne Bennett's really good at simplifying it, managing the man and keeping, and everyone has their own style. But Jason Taylor comes across as a very technical coach, but apparently he's very good either side of that. So, and then they've got, their other guys involved there through, and that all add to what they do, and the man management's pretty well. But what they're saying is that they feel like they're learning a lot and they're picking people that can understand what they're talking about. I just think that, the Dogs already had a lot of disruptions. Origin period was there. No one would have thought Max King or Kurt Mann were going to play Origin. We're missing Satili Tupanua for weeks. And he's provided something which we've lacked, and that's that sort of aggression. And then you've got players like Jacob Preston missed four rounds through that period as well. And then you add on to it Reid Marnie leaving the club, and he was leaving anyway. The headlines are wrong about that. And then you've got the Galvin and Sexton thing. So there's already a bunch of disruptions there. People also forget that Jamin Salmon was essentially Serrato was trying to have Jamin Salmon and Kurt Mann sort of play as, because we don't have an Isaiah Yao or a Cameron Murray or a Joseph Tarpanay or, one of these great players who can play long minutes and take it to the line and have really good passing games. We've had to use two players to do that. And when one of those players gets injured for 10 weeks, it really can affect your system a little bit. And add to that, getting a hooker who is very raw compared to a Reid Martin, for example. So all these things are going to play their part, and they're not excuses. I think it just says more about, where Canterbury are at. And
look, I mean, at the end of the day, they finished 6th in the ladder last year and then went out in the finals straight away. This year, they're going to get a second bite of the cherry. That's progress. Okay.
yeah,
So
it is.
So maybe take a leaf out of the Ricky Stewart book. What Ricky Stewart has done in terms of his messaging, his creation of the narrative, if you like, is say, little old Canberra, nobody thought we'd do this. Look at us, we're overachieving already. There's no pressure on the players. There actually probably doesn't need to be any pressure on any Bulldogs players in terms of bigger picture, because the club is heading in the right direction. I would like to talk about the defence now, if I can, because I have analysed that and come up with the assumption or the hypothesis that the Bulldogs system constantly gets exposed around the 3 and 4 in defender. So again, for the uninitiated, the 3 and 4 in defender is from the touch line. Your wing would be number 1, your centre would be number 2, your half traditionally is number 3, and your edge back rower is number 4 in. So that's your 3 and 4 in. Other coaches have called it different things. They might call it the crack or the pop or something like that. So Bulldogs tend to get exposed there, okay, and that's something that's been in the framework for well over a year now. And Bulldogs are exploitable when you move their defense around So with pinpoint accuracy. So the opposition has to move them around laterally, but not just move the ball sideways. Okay, they need to play away from the ruck, so maybe one or two passes, but somebody running directly into the defensive line on the end of that pass. And what that does is it puts the Bulldogs' defensive system under pressure. And you do that for a sustained period and then expose the cracks on each side, the 3 and 4 in defender. Now, on those sides and in those positions, we did have Toby Sexton, who is not a great defender. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But Lockie Galvin, the way they describe his defense is they say he's got to work on his defense. He's a very poor defender at the moment. Okay, so, and that's not an upgrade there in terms of the defensive side of the football at all. So they're very weak in those areas, and it's because of their defensive system. Now they tend to be up and in. And what I did notice in periods of this game, the key thing about an up and in defensive system, which is what the dogs have been famed for decades, really.
Yeah.
You need to have your spacings need to be perfect, okay? Because if you don't have those spacings perfect and consistent across the line, it presents opportunities of holes for the opposition. Now, the other thing you need to do is your line speed has to be sensational, and the Dogs are really good at coming up at speed. But again, it probably dropped off a little bit this last week. And once you do that, you have to get your rucks perfect. The way you tackle, the way you control the ruck, and how many people are in there. So a rule I coach to is the last one in to the tackle. So if there's a 3-man tackle and the last one that gets in, he has to be the first one off to get back into the defensive line. It didn't happen a lot. They got that wrong quite often, the Bulldogs. And there was defenders behind the defensive line, which then brought the spacings of the front line of the defence. It made them stretched. And Penrith were getting their noses through. So that's something else they need to be aware of, the Dogs. Okay. Now, again, I want to bring listeners right back to what I said almost at the start of my analysis, that been a big game the week before. Maybe Cameron Ciraldo tuned them up a little bit that week leading up as well, just to load them up. Maybe expected them to have a little bit of fatigue. So that could have contributed to that too. But yeah, it's definitely a problem. When the Dogs are up for it and they're really, really fresh, that whole system that I've just described and the way I've talked about exploiting it gets a hell of a lot harder, because Cameron Ciraldo has driven them really well and they've been very good. Now, that also opens another can of worms, is the style of the way the Bulldogs play. Are they starting to get tired as the year goes on as well? That's another question that gets thrown up by certain people. I'm not sure I subscribe to that, quite frankly, but yeah, it's just another question that some people throw up, because you have to keep moving in that system. You have to be mobile.
Well, look, I know that like all teams, there's players with injuries that, if it was earlier in the season or if they weren't able to keep going, they would probably lose they'd probably be rested and go and have surgery or whatever it is. But as long as they can keep doing their drills and keep training and whatever else, they'll keep playing, sort of thing. I know for a fact that they were flogged after the Roosters game, or there were certain individuals that were essentially told that they're not competing or doing, hitting the expectation. And when Ciraldo actually said it in the press conference, and people took that he was going to drop players, but all he actually said was that if players have got niggles or got injuries, that's my fault for letting them play, because from now on that's not happening. So it did get a response, and we saw that in the Melbourne game. There was much more. They played for 80 minutes. They were able to win back the wrestle numerous times. In this game against Penrith, there was parts which I really liked, but the 3 and 4 defender thing has actually been an issue all year.
And last year.
Yeah.
It's a structural thing. It's a structural thing.
Toby Sexton defensively, as far as the contact and the physicality, improved a lot, but there was numerous games on that right edge this year where Critter has effectively talked to Jacob Preston and to Toby Sexton, because their defence, where they've been exploited there, has actually, meant that they've got around us or got through us. Basically had the choices to do whatever they wanted to do on that side. The left edge has had its moments as well with Burton and Kickout, and I think it's been exploited a little bit more later in the season. I also feel that it was funny. I've watched the Raiders over the last few years in games against the Bulldogs. We've won the last 2 games against them, but they've been close games of 2 halves. But Ricky has exploited us that way through a whole set. So I've watched where they've run their players and they've tried to draw Kickout into a position where he's had to cover, and then they've exploited us through direct running, and then, just through plays like Hudson Young getting through. Even when the rest of their game's been pretty typical and easily managed, they've been able to break us down on certain plays and get close wins. The Canberra Bulldogs rivalry over the last 8 years, even though Canberra nearly won every game, the scoreline was always close, like ended up being 4 points or 6 points or something like that. And sometimes the Raiders don't look that good. Like they do now. They're definitely a serious football team. And I said at the start of the season that, they're going to be hard to beat, because they've developed these players over 3 or 4 years. So they've got that muscle memory. They know who they are. They know what their system is. They know what their football is about. They trust in each other and what they're going to do. And then they've got the right sort of mix going forward. Ricky knows how to acclimatise an English import better than anyone. And they've also played the part. But he's also evolved his team a little bit as well. I've noticed he's used the Moose's son. What's his name? Who came from Penrith. Starts with H. Do you know
Hudson
I'm talking about? No, not Hudson Young.
Who's the Moose?
Hodgkins, not Hosking. Zach Hosking. Yeah, so he's not bigger by any means, but he started him in the middle quite a few times, and he's in different games he's carried a more mobile bench, carried a couple of utilities in games. Like, it hasn't all just been power on his bench. And it's funny, the one I saw him sort of doing that, and then against the Bulldogs when we beat them, he started Hosking, but he carried 3 big bodies on the bench. And whilst they led us like 20-0, you could see they were running out of puff. And actually, I wouldn't mind if you analyse that Bulldog second half in that game and the first half, because, to be down 20-0 at Canberra, to come home and win 32-20 against the minor
When I've got some
premiers.
time, there's quite a lot of important football in the next few weeks. On that note, mate. Because I need to leave soon, as I've got other meeting. Looking ahead to next week, Cameron Serraldo has named, I think, every player who lives within Cooey of Belmore, hasn't he? He's named 22, so I think you're going to see some Ducks and Drakes. Okay, so anybody could be playing this weekend, right? And that again says to me what I said right at the start, that potentially it's been a 3 or 4 week plan from Cameron Ciraldo to what happens week 1 of the finals, because Canterbury can't drop any place and they can't gain a place this week.
Yeah.
So it's essentially a fixture they just have to fulfill. So, look, I am very intrigued to see what the Bulldogs come up with in the finals. I think, obviously, the second half of the season has been a little bit different in terms of results, not quite as dominant as they were, and we can, there's several reasons why that may have happened. So there's plenty of questions that need answering. But either way, they're going to be really intriguing to watch. I think that the two intriguing teams of the finals are the Raiders and the Bulldogs, because don't forget, it's not that long ago the Bulldogs were our benchmark. The Bulldogs were the benchmark in the first half of this season. They were the top of the ladder, and we everybody was looking up at the Bulldogs, and now they sit in third, but they're still top 4, and they have got 2 bites of the cherry. And look, I'm sure every Bulldogs fan in Europe will definitely trust Cameron Ciraldo. It doesn't mean he's going to get it right. He's still a young coach. He's still only in his 3rd year of head coaching. And look at Ricky Stewart. He won the comp in his first year, and then he's been to 2 grand finals since. One of them was the year after, or was it 3 grand finals since? Was it 2 after with the Roosters, and he lost them both, and then he got to 1 in 2019 with the Raiders. So it just shows you that it's not an easy comp to win this one, and Cameron Ciraldo will be learning on the job as well. And whatever you 100%. End up with this year, I think for it to be a pass mark, you need to win a finals game, and I think there's every chance you can win a finals game. I think if you were to lose the first one, for example, and then win the next one at home, which you will, because you'll have the house full signs up at a core, right? I mean, what a great end to the season that you're in a prelim, and I think you can call that a pass mark, and then anything that happens a big bonus.
Yeah, well, I'll only add probably 30 seconds to that. Start of the year, we beat the bottom 4 twice, most of them. Lost to the Broncos and the Dolphins, and then we had Origin. And the last 4 games against pretty much the last 4 teams that have ever won a comp in the NRL. So, you all know what this time of year is all about. So I think it's the fact we're close in most of those games sets us up to be able to go out there and compete. I think last year we did enough to beat Manly in that semi-final, and discipline got us big time. Many fans blamed Paul Reid-Marnie for that. I don't. The team wins, the team loses, but yeah. So I don't disagree that they need to win a semi-final. For me, it's all about how they play. If they're there when the whips are cracking, if there's a chance to win it, and they miss an opportunity, it's like the Melbourne game, and I'll finish on this point. We crossed the try line 6 times. There was a dubious call at the end to win the match. Now, we didn't win, but the way I see it, they did enough. The final piece of the puzzle wasn't there, but they did enough with their game plan and what they were out there to do to actually cross the line 6 times to the opposition 3 times. They just weren't good enough to execute that final last bit. Carrose knocks the ball on, someone's held up, and then there's a dubious penalty. So when I look at it, I'm like, they're going toe to toe with one of the best sides for the last two decades. We probably do need to do more to be able to win these matches, and whether we can do that or not is going to be proven in the next couple of weeks. But I'm very proud of the boys. I feel they have come a long way, and I still think there'll be a lot of turnover in this roster before we see the Bulldogs where they want to be as far as a dominant force in the competition. I think they're a little bit off that yet, but let's see how far they can go. And I'd love nothing more than to see our Bulldogs Raiders grand final, which would mean the Dogs would have to win the first semi they play, or the Raiders would have to lose the first semi they play, or it can't happen. If that makes sense. They've got either both got to win or both got to lose, basically. Otherwise, I'll meet in a prelim. So.
All right, mate. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Lee. Thank you so much, mate.
Of you the next few weeks.
Yes, and thanks for watching, everyone. We'll get Lee in. Definitely learning a lot on the go. Check out his book. You can get it on Amazon, or let me know. I can. I'll have a couple of copies.
And if anybody wants to come to England too, $6.5 grand. $6.5 grand for flights, accommodation, test match tickets, transfers, and a few tours in there as well, a few trips, and like I said, they
might as well just go there and then just head straight from there to Vegas.
That's right. That's right.
That's probably the one thing holding some of the Bulldogs fans back, might be the Vegas trip. But for people who want to do that, get on. Hopefully, I can make it, but it's very much up in the air.
No worries.
All right, Lee, thanks for coming on, mate.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, talk soon. Go the Dogs.